the COVID years, when the station was not running and pumping water, our number 2 engine, the Harvey of Hayle, suffered degradation to the valves at the bottom of the well. The effect was that air leaking through the delivery valve made it impossible to prime, and so no pumping was possible. These valves have wooden seats that we summarised had dried out and rotted over the 12 or so years since they were last replaced. As soon as our pumps lifted their last ton of water in 2022, a dedicated team of volunteers were tasked to remove, restore, and then return the delivery valve to the Crofton well. The valve is in the rising main behind a 700-kilogram door that is held in place by many large bolts. Temporary joists were installed and hung with a chain hoist. Removing the bolts required a lot of attention to safety, with the weight of the door held by shackles on the chain hoist. Once removed, the door was lowered to the well floor and stowed safely away. The gasket frame and rubbers were brought up to the surface for cleaning and inspection. The valve could now be inspected, and we could immediately see the rotted state of the teeth. The chain hoists were re-rigged to start the process of rising the valve to the surface. When in position, the valve is held in place by a clamping beam known as a strongback. A chain block 14 metres, 40 feet, up at the top of the well is used to take the weight of the crossbeam while the nuts are removed and the holding stud is removed. The strongback is lowered and removed from the cavity and stowed away. The holding stud was brought to the surface for cleaning and lubrication. The top chain hoist is now used to lift the valve top clear of its base. A second chain hoist is used to pull the top sideways, coordinating with the lift up the delivery pipe until the valve top is clear of the housing. The delivery pipe link is disconnected, and the top is raised to the top platform of the well, and through more shuffling of hoists out into the side boiler house. The process is then repeated for the valve lower half containing the rotted wooden teeth. After removing both parts of the valve chamber can now be examined and cleaned. On examining the valve seats, it was clear that the upper seat was heavily pitted. Using industrial metal-loaded epoxy from Belzona, this has been resurfaced. The height of the 2 seats was checked and found to be good, so we were happy they are running true. The valve is now passed to the woodworking team for renovation.
The 2 rings on the upper section of the valve consist of metal, and those on the bottom half consist of continuous wooden rings made from around 70 individual blocks, or teeth as we call them. The last time these were replaced was in 2009, and time had taken its toll on them. When we examined them, the teeth were suffering from unevenness and minor mechanical damage, but the worst deterioration was from bacteria which thrive in the damp conditions and had blackened and softened the wood. So, the first job of the refurbishment was to knock out all the old teeth, a job for brute force and a crowbar. This left 2 empty channels ready to accept new wooden teeth. The wood used for the refurbishment was purchased from a local hardwood merchant, where we were lucky enough to meet the owner, who advised that Iroko, an African hardwood, would probably stand up better to both mechanical and microbiological attack than the English oak which had been used previously. The Iroko was supplied in partially shaped lengths, and our job was to cut each tooth to a precise length so that each one had the same height. Then they had to be accurately curved on a sanding machine to fit the shape of the circular channels. This was a lengthy process, and typically the most we were able to make in one day was only 6. To ensure a tight fit in the channels, each tooth had a slit cut in the bottom. A wedge was then inserted into the slit, and the tooth then hammered into position. This pushed the wedge fully into the slit, which expanded the bottom of the tooth, so it tightly anchored itself between the walls of the channel. Once both rings of teeth were complete, the top half of the valve was lowered onto the part containing the new teeth. The clearance between the new wooden rings and the metal seal was then checked for accuracy. After this checking, the top half was removed and minor adjustments were made to ensure good seals around both rings. The valve was then ready to be reinstalled into its working position at the bottom of the rising main in the Crofton well. The job took about 15 days to complete, spread across 4 months, and accounted for around 120 man-hours.
Returning the valve to its home down the well was the reverse of the removal process, with a lot of care to avoid damaging the newly refurbished wooden valve seats. Until we run our engine trials in April, we won't be able to test the newly refurbished valve, but this project wouldn't have been possible without the dedicated team of volunteers, their expertise and experience.